I still remember the crisp smell of autumn that morning, the kind that carried memories of old family dinners, laughter, and the sound of my late husband humming while basting the turkey. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite day of the year, but this one felt different. Andrew had insisted that I come over early, though his tone made it sound more like an obligation than an invitation. "Mom, Melissa's busy hosting. Just try not to fuss around the kitchen, okay?" I had laughed softly and said, "Of course, dear." But deep down, my heart tightened a little. When I arrived at their house, the door opened to the rich aroma of roasted turkey and cinnamon pies. It was beautiful. Everything looked like a picture from a magazine. But the warmth in the air wasn't from love. It was from the oven. Melissa greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, Helen, you're here. Could you just hang your coat there? We're a bit busy right now." I nodded, placing my old knitted shawl on the hanger and clutching the small pumpkin pie I had baked that morning. I had made it from scratch, the same recipe Andrew used to love when he was little. But when I offered it, Melissa said politely, "Oh, that's sweet, but we already have dessert covered." She took the pie and set it aside on the counter, near the trash bin. I tried not to notice. I walked into the living room, where Noah sat on the couch, scrolling through his tablet. When he saw me, his face lit up. "Grandma!" he shouted, rushing over to hug me. That single moment, his small arms around my waist felt like sunshine breaking through a gray sky. "You look beautiful today, Grandma," he said. I smiled, brushing his hair gently. "And you, my dear, look taller every time I see you." At dinner, I sat quietly at the far end of the table. They laughed and talked about work, travel plans, and people I didn't know. No one asked me about my week or how lonely the house felt without their father's voice in it. I kept my smile fixed, taking small bites, pretending I didn't notice the way Melissa rolled her eyes when I accidentally dropped my fork. But Noah noticed. Every time his mother's voice turned sharp, his small hand would slide onto mine under the table, a silent promise that I wasn't alone. And just as I began to think the night couldn't feel any colder, Melissa said something that froze me completely, words that would echo in my heart long after that dinner ended. I sat there, frozen in my chair, my eyes fixed on the flickering candle at the center of the table. Melissa's voice still echoed in my head, soft but sharp enough to cut straight through my chest. "We should stop inviting her." Andrew didn't respond right away. He just sighed and said quietly, "Melissa, not now." But his silence spoke louder than her words. He didn't disagree. I pretended not to hear. I smiled faintly when Melissa asked if anyone wanted more cranberry sauce. My lips moved, but no sound came out. My heart, however, spoke in 1,000 small cracks. After dinner, they moved into the living room. Melissa poured wine for herself and Andrew, while I quietly began clearing the plates. "Oh, Mom, you don't have to do that," Andrew said half-heartedly, without looking up from his phone. "We'll handle it later." But no one moved to help. So I stacked the plates anyway, careful not to clatter them. Old habits die hard. Noah wandered in, holding his empty plate. "Grandma, can I help you?" I smiled, my throat tightening. "You just sit, dear. You've helped enough by keeping me company." He frowned. "Mom and Dad shouldn't talk like that. I heard them too." My hands paused midair. I hadn't realized he was close enough to hear. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered, forcing a small smile. Sometimes grown-ups forget their manners when they're tired. He shook his head, stubbornly. No, they forget kindness. Those words, so pure, so heavy for a 13-year-old, melted the ice inside me. I reached out and hugged him tightly. His small hands pressed against my back, and for the first time that evening, I felt seen. Later that night, as I sat by the window watching the light shimmer over their neatly trimmed yard, I thought about how strange love can be. It gives everything, even when it receives nothing in return. Maybe that's what motherhood really is. Giving, even when your hands are empty. I looked at the pie I had brought, still untouched on the counter. I wrapped it up quietly, planning to take it home. Not out of pride, but because I knew no one else would eat it. Before heading to bed, I heard Noah's soft voice from the hallway. "Grandma, can I have a piece of your pie tomorrow morning?" My heart swelled. "Of course, sweetheart. It'll taste better with you." The next morning, a stranger arrived at the front door with an envelope. That envelope carried my late husband's name on it. And that envelope changed everything. The next morning, the house was unusually quiet. The smell of coffee drifted faintly through the kitchen, mixed with the cold air from a half-open window. I had woken early, as I always did, to sit on the porch and watch the sunrise. It was one of the few habits that still gave me peace. Noah joined me not long after, wrapped in a blanket. He was holding 2 slices of the pumpkin pie we hadn't eaten last night. "I heated them up, Grandma," he said proudly. "You said it would taste better with me." I smiled as he handed me a plate. "And you were right," I said, taking a bite. "It tastes like home." Just then, the sound of a car pulling up broke the quiet. A man in a dark coat stepped out, holding an envelope. He looked around uncertainly before walking toward the porch. "Mrs. Helen Porter?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, standing up. "Is something wrong?" He shook his head politely. "No, ma'am. I'm from Mason and Brooks' law office. I was asked to deliver this personally. It's regarding your late husband, Mr. Robert Porter." My breath caught for a moment. It had been years since anyone said my husband's name out loud like that. "Thank you," I murmured, taking the envelope carefully. The man tipped his hat and left. Noah watched me curiously. "What's that, Grandma?" "I'm not sure, sweetheart." I sat down again, my fingers trembling slightly as I slid the envelope open. Inside was a letter and a folded document, both marked with Robert's old signature. The handwriting was neat and familiar, as if he had just written it yesterday. "My dearest Helen, if you are reading this, it means I could not be there beside you. I've made arrangements for you to live comfortably no matter what happens. Our home, the savings, and all the investments are now under your name. You deserve peace and security after all the love you've given this family. Take care of yourself, my love, Robert." Tears blurred my vision. For years, I thought everything we had was gone, spent or sold. I had no idea Robert had quietly ensured my safety even after death. Noah leaned closer. "Grandpa left that for you?" I said, whispering through tears. "Yes, he always kept his promises." But as I folded the letter, I didn't notice Melissa standing by the kitchen doorway.
Her eyes were fixed on the document in my hand, and in that fleeting moment, I saw something in her face. Not curiosity, but calculation. That night, Melissa told Andrew everything she overheard, and from that moment on, their kindness suddenly felt rehearsed.
It started that very evening. Small gestures at first, easy to miss if I hadn't lived long enough to recognize when kindness is too sudden to be sincere. Melissa, who had spent the previous night complaining about the turkey being overcooked, suddenly appeared at my bedroom door with a tray. "Thought you might want some tea before bed, Helen," she said, smiling brightly. Too brightly. "Oh, thank you, dear," I replied softly, surprised by the offer. The tea was hot and perfectly brewed, the way I used to make it for Robert. But there was something in the way she hovered, waiting for my reaction, that made me uneasy. The next morning, Andrew came down from his office early, which was rare. "Mom," he said cheerfully, "I was thinking, maybe you shouldn't be living alone anymore. That house is too big for one person. You could stay here prominently. We have the space." I looked up from my knitting, startled. "Oh, Andrew, that's kind of you, but I've managed fine on my own for years." He forced a laugh. "Oh, sure. But still, it's not safe for you to be all by yourself. We just want what's best for you." What's best for me? Funny how those words sound different when there's money behind them. Later that day, Melissa joined in the chorus. "You know, Helen," she said while slicing apples in the kitchen, "Andrew's right. You really shouldn't be handling finances and property papers at your age. It's stressful. Maybe you should let him help manage things. He's great with numbers." I smiled faintly. "Yes, I remember. He used to count stars on the ceiling when he couldn't sleep." Her knife froze midair for a second before she forced a laugh. "Well, now he counts assets instead." Their sudden affection continued for days. Breakfast trays, warm smiles, long-forgotten compliments. Melissa even asked me to share my pie recipe. But their words felt heavy, rehearsed, like lines in a play that had been practiced too long. Noah noticed it too. "Grandma," he whispered one evening while helping me wash the dishes, "Mom and Dad are acting weird. They keep talking about Grandpa's money when they think I'm not around." I looked down at him. His worried eyes reminded me so much of Robert's. Honest, searching, kind. "It's all right, sweetheart," I said softly. "Sometimes people lose themselves in the noise of wanting more. But we'll be careful, okay?" He nodded. "I'll help you, Grandma. I'll watch them." I patted his cheek. "You're my brave boy, Noah. Just don't let them see you noticing." That night, I could hear Andrew and Melissa whispering in their room. My name, Robert's, and the word inheritance floated faintly through the air vents. And as I sat in the dark, holding Robert's letter close to my chest, I realized something painful. My own son was planning to take what his father had left for me. The next morning, Melissa suggested something unexpected, a trip to the lawyer's office. She said it was just to make sure everything's handled properly. But I could already see the trap forming beneath her smile. Melissa's voice was unusually cheerful that morning. She hummed while preparing breakfast, flipping pancakes as if life had suddenly turned into a fairy tale. "Helen," she said casually, "Andrew and I were thinking maybe we should help you sort through your husband's documents. Make sure everything's legally settled." I looked up from my tea. "Settled? Robert's lawyer already handled everything years ago." She smiled too sweetly. "Oh, of course. We just thought it would be easier if Andrew managed things from now on. These papers can get confusing." Andrew nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Mom, it's just to protect you. We can stop by the lawyer's office this week, double-check everything. You can bring that letter, too." I knew then that the kindness I'd felt these past few days wasn't love. It was strategy. They weren't trying to protect me. They were trying to protect what they thought could be theirs. Still, I said nothing. Years of motherhood had taught me that silence often reveals more than questions ever could. Later that afternoon, I found Noah sitting on the back porch, tossing a small football between his hands. He looked up when he saw me. "They're planning something, aren't they?" I hesitated, then sat beside him. Sometimes, Noah, people forget who they are when money walks into the room. It blinds them. He frowned. "But you won't let them take it, right?" I smiled softly. "Your grandfather left everything for my peace of mind. Not to cause storms. But don't worry, sweetheart. I'll handle it." That evening, Melissa printed out a list of necessary documents and left them neatly on the dining room table. "Just a few forms, Helen," she said, tapping the papers. "If we bring these to the lawyer, we can make sure your finances are safe." I glanced at the forms. They looked official. Too official. Titles, signatures, transfer statements. Things I recognized from my years of managing household finances with Robert. I might be old, but I wasn't blind. I folded the papers neatly and placed them back on the table. "Thank you, Melissa. I review them tonight." She smiled, relieved. "Of course. Take your time." When she left, I opened the stack again, and what I saw nearly made my heart stop. Hidden among the legitimate pages was a document transferring property rights to Andrew's name. They hadn't even tried to disguise it well. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of realization. My son, the boy I once rocked to sleep, the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, was planning to steal from me. I didn't cry. Instead, I quietly folded the papers, put them in my handbag, and decided to visit Mason and Brooks myself. And I knew exactly who would come with me. That night, I knocked softly on Noah's door. "Sweetheart," I whispered, "would you like to go on a little trip with Grandma tomorrow?" He grinned. "Only if it's our secret." The morning sun peeked shyly through the curtains as I tied my scarf, careful not to make any noise. The house was quiet. Andrew and Melissa were still asleep, and I didn't want them to know I'd be gone for a few hours. Noah tiptoed into the hallway, his hair still messy from sleep. "Ready, Grandma?" he whispered, with a grin that reminded me so much of his grandfather. "Ready?" I whispered back, pressing a finger to my lips. "Let's keep this just between us, all right?" He nodded, eyes sparkling with excitement. To him, it felt like an adventure. To me, it was something heavier, a quiet act of survival. We walked to the bus stop together, his small hand wrapped tightly around mine. The cold morning air nipped at our cheeks, but there was something strangely peaceful about it. For the first time in days, I felt in control again. When we reached the Mason and Brooks law office, the receptionist looked surprised. "Mrs. Porter," she said warmly, "it's been a while. How can we help you today?" I smiled politely. I need to speak with Mr. Mason if he's available. It's about my husband's estate. A few minutes later, Mr. Mason, gray-haired, kind-eyed, and patient as ever, welcomed us into his office. Helen, my dear, it's good to see you. And this must be your grandson. Yes, this is Noah, I said proudly. He's my little helper today. Mr. Mason chuckled. A fine assistant, I'm sure. I opened my handbag and placed the stack of papers Melissa had given me on his desk. Could you take a look at these, please? My son and his wife suggested I sign them. They said it was just to manage my finances. He adjusted his glasses, flipping through the pages. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the rustling of paper. Then he sighed softly and looked up at me. Helen, my dear, he said gently, this isn't a management agreement. It's a transfer of ownership. If you signed these, your home and savings would legally belong to your son. My heart sank, though deep down I already knew. Still, hearing it spoken aloud made the betrayal real. Noah clenched his fists. That's not fair. They can't do that to Grandma. Mr. Mason smiled sadly. Don't worry, young man. Your grandmother is much smarter than they think. I exhaled slowly, steadying my voice. Thank you, Mr. Mason. I won't sign anything, but I think I'll let them believe I will, for a while. He nodded approvingly. Sometimes the best lesson isn't in anger, but in patience. As Noah and I stepped back into the chilly air, he looked up at me. What are you going to do, Grandma? I smiled faintly. Your grandfather once told me, never let greed see fear in your eyes. So I'll smile, sweetheart. I'll smile and wait. That evening, Andrew asked me if I'd had a quiet day. I smiled and said, yes, dear, very quiet. He didn't know I'd just learned everything, but soon he would. Dinner that evening was unusually cheerful, or at least they tried to make it seem so. The same people who had spent the past few days snapping at me for the smallest things were suddenly all smiles. Melissa even served my favorite roast turkey with cranberry glaze, a dish she once called old-fashioned. Mom, Andrew said with a forced warmth in his voice, Melissa and I were talking, and we think it's time we help you out more. You shouldn't have to worry about all those financial things anymore. He smiled too widely, like a salesman trying to close a deal. I smiled back softly. That's very thoughtful of you, Andrew. I truly appreciate it. Melissa chimed in. It's for your own good, Helen. You've done enough worrying in your life. We just want to make things easier for you. I stirred my soup slowly, pretending to think. You're right, dear. I suppose I could use some help. Perhaps after Thanksgiving, we can go over those papers together again. Her eyes flickered with excitement. Of course, we'll handle everything for you. Noah was silent. He kept glancing at me, worry clouding his young face. I reached under the table and gave his hand a little squeeze. He understood. I had a plan. After dinner, Melissa brought out coffee and pie, acting the perfect hostess. She even laughed at my stories, the same ones she used to roll her eyes at. Andrew joined in, patting my shoulder affectionately, asking about my health and comfort.
It was a strange kind of play, one where everyone knew their lines but pretended not to. Later that night, I sat in my room, the faint glow of my lamp spreading across the floor. I could hear them talking downstairs. Their voices were low but sharp, like knives behind silk. "She's almost convinced," Melissa whispered. "Just a few more days. Once she signs, everything's ours." Andrew sighed. "Good. Just make sure Noah doesn't mess this up. That boy's too attached to her." I smiled sadly to myself. They truly thought I was that naive, but they were wrong. I looked at an old photograph on my nightstand. My husband, Robert, smiling in his favorite armchair. "You were always the clever one," I murmured. "But tonight, my dear, it's my turn." When I turned off the light, the house was quiet again, except for one thing. A storm was brewing, not outside, but within these walls. The next morning, I called Mr. Mason again. This time, I didn't ask for advice. I gave instructions. If Andrew and Melissa wanted a game, I was going to play it better than they ever imagined. The next morning dawned gray and quiet. The smell of rain drifted through the open kitchen window as I made my tea. Andrew and Melissa were still asleep upstairs. No surprise, since they'd stayed up late whispering about plans they thought I couldn't hear. I slipped into my coat and stepped outside, telling Noah I had an errand. He knew better than to ask where I was going. His knowing nod was enough. The cab dropped me off right in front of Mr. Mason's office again. As soon as I entered, he stood to greet me. "Mrs. Porter," he said warmly, "I had a feeling I'd be seeing you again soon." I smiled faintly. "You were right, Mr. Mason. I've decided it's time to make things official." He gestured for me to sit. "You've thought about your estate?" "Yes," I said quietly. "My son and his wife are expecting me to sign away my assets to them, but instead, I'd like to make a change to my will." He nodded, already pulling out a file. "Go on." I took a deep breath. "I want to ensure my grandson, Noah Porter, inherits everything. The house, the savings, Robert's pension fund, all of it. But I don't want Andrew or Melissa to know until I'm gone." Mr. Mason raised his eyebrows. "That's a strong decision." "It's a fair one," I said firmly. "Robert always said wealth reveals a person's heart. I suppose now I finally understand what he meant." He leaned back, smiling faintly. "You've got your husband's quiet strength, Helen. I'll make sure everything is handled properly." As he drafted the new papers, I watched the rain trickle down the window pane. There was sadness in my chest. Not anger, not even disappointment. Just a deep ache that the people I raised chose greed over love. When everything was signed and sealed, Mr. Mason handed me a copy. "It's done. Noah is now your legal heir. The rest of the world won't know until it's time." I thanked him, feeling a strange calm wash over me. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it to protect the only person who still saw me for who I truly was. As I stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The sun peeked through the clouds, casting a faint golden glow over the wet streets. For the first time in days, I felt light again. When I got home, Melissa greeted me out the door with forced cheer. "Out shopping, Helen?"
I smiled gently. Just taking care of a few personal matters, dear. Andrew joined her, his voice dripping with sweetness. Good for you, Mom. It's nice to see you so active lately. Oh, yes, I replied softly, taking off my coat. You'll see just how active I can be very soon. That night, I overheard Melissa whisper, "She's signing the papers tomorrow, finally." I smiled in the dark. Tomorrow, they'd get exactly what they deserved, just not the way they expected. The morning of the signing came dressed in calm sunshine, the kind that pretends everything is fine. Melissa was already bustling around the kitchen, humming an old Christmas tune far too early for the season. It wasn't joy, it was nerves, disguised as hospitality. "Morning, Helen," she chirped as I entered. "We thought today would be perfect to get those papers signed. Less to worry about before the holidays, right?" Andrew came in behind her, holding a folder. That folder. "Mom, I've already arranged everything. We just need your signature and we'll take care of the rest." I smiled sweetly and nodded. "Of course, dear. I trust you completely." If they noticed the faint tremble in my voice, they mistook it for frailty, not wisdom. We gathered around the dining table, the same one where I had once carved Thanksgiving turkey with my husband and watched Noah chase fireflies through the window. Now it was a table of deceit, polished to hide fingerprints of greed. Melissa slid the papers in front of me with a practiced smile. "Right here, Helen. Just sign where the tabs are." I adjusted my glasses and picked up the pen. My hand hovered for a moment. "So, this means you'll handle all my accounts?" Andrew nodded, his tone patient, almost rehearsed. "Yes, Mom. Everything will be in good hands." I could feel Noah watching from the staircase, his small face half hidden, eyes full of worry. I gave him the slightest nod. Then, as I lowered the pen, I said softly, "Oh, I almost forgot. Mr. Mason said I should have him review everything one last time before I sign. You don't mind, do you?" Their smiles froze. "Mr. Mason?" Melissa repeated, her voice tightening. "Yes," I said, standing up slowly. "You know him, the lawyer who's been handling Robert's estate since he passed. He's such a dear man. In fact, he's on his way here now. I called him this morning." Andrew blinked, his face paling. "You what?" "Oh, didn't I mention? He's bringing a few papers of his own. Said it was urgent." A knock sounded at the door right on cue. Melissa's eyes darted toward it like a cornered animal. Noah grinned quietly from the stairs. I opened the door, and there stood Mr. Mason, briefcase in hand, calm as ever. "Good morning, Mrs. Porter. Hello, everyone." He took a seat beside me and placed his papers on the table. "I thought it best to finalize everything together," he said politely, looking straight at Andrew and Melissa. "Finalize?" Melissa stammered. "You mean—" "Yes," Mr. Mason said, adjusting his glasses. "Mrs. Porter has already updated her will. Everything she owns, including her home, accounts, and personal estate, will now belong to her grandson, Noah Porter." The room fell silent. The clock ticked like a slow drum. Andrew's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Noah stepped down from the stairs, his face lit with quiet pride. I folded my hands, looking at them both. "I'm sorry, dear," I said softly, "but love can't be bought with kindness that only comes when money is involved." Melissa's face hardened, the mask slipping.
You tricked us. I smiled sadly. No, Melissa. I simply stopped letting you trick me. Andrew's face turned red with anger, and Melissa stormed out in silence. But that night, as I sat with Noah by the fire, I knew this story wasn't over. Sometimes the real test of family comes after the truth is told.
The rest of that day felt like walking through the ashes of something that once had warmth. After Mr. Mason left, silence hung heavy in the air, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that hums with things left unsaid. Andrew sat at the table, staring at the empty papers that was supposed to make him rich. His face was blank, but his hands trembled. Melissa paced near the window, muttering under her breath. Every now and then, her voice cracked through the quiet like thunder. "How could you do this to us?" she finally snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "After everything we've done for you?" I looked up from my chair, calm but tired. "Done for me, Melissa? You mean the cold stares, the impatient sighs, the way you talk about me as if I'm a burden?" Andrew glared at me. "We were only trying to help. You misinterpreted everything." I shook my head gently. "No, son. I saw everything for what it was." Noah stood beside me, his little hand clutching mine. "Grandma doesn't need your help. She just needed love." Melissa rolled her eyes, muttering something about manipulation and old people games. She stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. Andrew lingered a moment longer, guilt flickering in his eyes. "Mom," he said, his voice softer now, "you didn't have to do this. You could have just talked to us." I smiled faintly. "I tried, Andrew. For years, I tried. But you only listened when you thought it would profit you." He looked down at the floor, then walked away without another word. The sound of the front door closing was the quietest heartbreak I'd ever heard. That evening, Noah and I sat by the fireplace. The flames danced gently, reflecting in his eyes. He leaned against my shoulder and whispered, "You're really brave, Grandma." I chuckled softly. "No, my dear. I'm just old enough to know when silence can be louder than shouting." We sat there for a long while, saying nothing. The world outside seemed still. Snow beginning to fall, tiny white flecks catching the orange glow of the firelight. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in someone else's home. I felt at peace. Later, as I got ready for bed, I looked at Robert's photo on my nightstand. "It's done, love. Our grandson will be just fine." The house was quiet now. Maybe too quiet, but I knew Noah's laughter would fill it again tomorrow. That was enough. A week later, Andrew came back, alone, without Melissa. He stood on my porch with something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Remorse. But could a wounded heart truly forgive after all that had been said and done? It had been a week since that bitter Thanksgiving. The snow outside had thickened, wrapping the whole neighborhood in a soft white silence. Inside, the air felt different, warmer somehow. Noah and I had settled into a quiet rhythm of peace. We cooked together, played cards in the evenings, and talked about his dreams. For once my house felt like a home again. Then, one cold afternoon, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the lace curtains, I saw Andrew's familiar figure step out, clutching something in his hand. He looked older than I remembered, tired, defeated. Melissa wasn't with him. When I opened the door, he stood there awkwardly, his breath fogging in the chill. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Hello, Andrew." I folded my arms gently. "You're alone today." He nodded, glancing down. "Yeah. Melissa, she's staying with her sister for a while. We had a fight. About everything." I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside, letting him in. He hesitated before entering, as if the walls themselves might judge him. We sat in the living room by the fire. He looked around at the pictures on the mantel, our family, when things were still whole. One photo caught his eye, little Noah sitting on Robert's lap, both laughing so hard their eyes were shut. Andrew sighed. "Dad would be ashamed of me, wouldn't he?" My heart softened, but I didn't rush to fill the silence. He needed to say it, really say it. "I got lost, Mom," he finally whispered. "Somewhere between wanting to do well and wanting more, I forgot who I was raised to be. I hurt you, and I can't take that back." I looked at him quietly for a long moment. "Andrew, you didn't just hurt me. You hurt yourself. Greed does that. It eats the good in us slowly, until all that's left is hunger." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I know. I don't expect forgiveness, Mom, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." I reached across the table, placing my wrinkled hand over his. "Andrew," I said softly, "forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you're given. And I give it to you, not because you deserve it, but because I love you." His shoulders trembled as he bowed his head. For the first time in years, I saw my son again, not the man who had forgotten me, but the boy who used to run through our backyard calling my name. Noah peeked in from the hallway, unsure if he should interrupt. I smiled at him. "Come, sweetheart," I said. "Your father and I are just having a talk." Andrew turned toward him, tears in his eyes. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "I owe you an apology, too." Noah walked over hesitantly. "It's okay, Dad," he murmured. "Grandma says it's never too late to be kind again." The three of us sat there quietly, generations bound by both pain and forgiveness. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and endless, like a gentle reminder that even after the harshest storms, the world can still be made new. That night, after Andrew left, I watched the snow settle over the porch steps. Something in me knew this would be our last winter together in that house. I had one final decision to make, and it would change everything.
That night, the house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that follows tears, not loneliness. I sat by the window, watching the snow gather on the porch steps, soft and untouched. Andrew's visit had stirred something deep inside me, an ache, yes, but also a strange peace. For the first time in a long while, I believed he might find his way back to the man his father wanted him to be. Noah had fallen asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, the firelight flickering across his young face. His breathing was steady, peaceful. I looked at him for a long time, my heart full of love and something bittersweet. I knew then that the time had come for one last decision, one that had been quietly growing in my heart since Robert passed. The next morning, I called Mr. Mason. "It's Helen Porter," I said gently. "I'd like to make one final change." He paused for a moment. "Of course, Helen. What did you have in mind?" "I want to set up a trust," I said. for Noah's education, his future, everything he might need. But I also want something for Andrew. Not money, but a home to rebuild his life in. He'll need a chance to make things right. Mr. Mason was quiet before replying. You never cease to amaze me, Helen. Most people would hold on to their bitterness forever. I smiled faintly. Bitterness is heavy, Mr. Mason, and I've carried enough in my lifetime. I'd rather travel light. When the papers were ready, I tucked them safely into a folder and placed it inside my drawer. Noah and I spent that day decorating the Christmas tree. A simple one, but full of memories. Ornaments Robert had carved years ago, the old glass angel from my first Christmas as a wife, and a new ornament Noah had made from paper and string. Do you think Dad will visit again for Christmas? Noah asked softly. I looked at him and smiled. I think so, sweetheart. People always find their way home eventually, especially when love is still waiting. That evening, as we stood by the fire, I looked around the house one last time. The photographs, the furniture, the worn carpet on the stairs, everything whispered of a life fully lived. I'll miss this place, I murmured. Noah looked up at me. You're leaving, Grandma? Not yet, I said, brushing his hair back. But soon. It's time for you to make new memories here, not just mine. He hugged me tightly, and I held him close, feeling the slow rhythm of his heartbeat against mine. Sometimes love isn't about holding on. It's about letting go, gently, gracefully, when the time feels right. A few weeks later, as the first light of a new year broke through my window, I knew my story had come full circle. But what I didn't know was how that one final letter would change everything for Noah and Andrew forever.
The winter that followed felt endless but peaceful. A slow, quiet passing of days where the world outside my window turned white and still. My body had grown weaker, but my heart had never felt lighter. I spent my last few weeks writing letters, not to lawyers, not about money, but to the people I loved. One was for Noah, another for Andrew. The morning the nurse found me, I was sitting by the window, wrapped in my favorite knitted shawl. The teacup beside me had gone cold. My notebook lay open, the last page signed neatly, with love always, Grandma Helen. A few weeks later, Andrew returned to the house again, this time with Noah by his side. The air inside still smelled faintly of cinnamon and old wood polish, just like it always had when I was alive. On the table was a sealed envelope with both their names written in my careful handwriting. Noah opened it first, his fingers trembling slightly. Inside was a letter, written in blue ink. My dearest Noah, if you're reading this, it means my journey has ended, but yours, my darling, has only begun. You were the light of my later years, the laughter in my quiet house, and the reminder that love still grows, even in cold places. I've left everything I could for you, not because of what you did, but because of who you are. Never lose that kindness, even when the world gives you reasons to harden. And one more thing. Forgive your father. He's lost more than I ever could count. Help him find his way again. That will be your greatest inheritance. With all the love in my heart, Grandma Helen. Andrew took his own letter with shaking hands. He read it silently, his lips moving slightly over the words. Tears streamed down his face before he reached the end. My dear Andrew, you were my first heartbeat of love. My little boy who once brought me dandelions from the yard and told me they were flowers. I know life changed you. I know greed found you when grief left you empty. But I also know the good in you never died. It was only buried. I've forgiven you long before you asked. The only thing I ever wanted was to see you and Noah together again, as father and son, not strangers in the same house. If you ever doubt yourself, just remember, redemption isn't found in money or comfort. It's found in kindness. Live kindly, Andrew. Love loudly. And never forget, you were always my son. Love, Mom. Andrew set the letter down and pulled Noah into a tight embrace. Neither spoke. Words were too small for what they felt. Later that evening, they lit a candle by my favorite chair and sat together in silence, watching the flame flicker. For the first time in years, the house wasn't filled with resentment or loneliness, only warmth. Noah looked up at his father and smiled faintly. She got her happy ending, didn't she? Andrew nodded, tears in his eyes. She always did. She just gave it to us instead. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft, forgiving, endless. And somewhere, I hoped Robert and I were watching it together, smiling at the family we'd finally mended. Some stories end when the heart stops beating, but a grandmother's love, it echoes forever.